We have started the recording now. All right, so may I invite Marlene, please, to do the welcome.
Thanks so much, Yasmin. Hi, everyone. A very warm welcome to our webinar, which is titled Applying for the Strengthening Feminist Movements webinar. My name is Malin. I'm the Director of Programs at WFA, and we're very, very excited to have you here with us today. I was informed that there's a lot of interest with 223 registrants for our webinar today, and this excludes the webinar tomorrow for Southeast Asia applicants. So we're really hoping that this translates to actual applications. We're very keen to be able to support feminist movement building and women's, girls, trans, and intersex rights work in the region. So before we get into the webinar proper, let me just introduce the rest of the WFA team. I am joined today by both the grants and finance team. So may I call on Himakshi first?
Sure. Thanks, Malin. Hi, everyone. My name is Himakshi, and I am a program officer in the grants team. I'm based in Bangalore, India. Over to you, Logna.
Hi, everyone. Very glad to be here. My name is Logna, and I'm a program associate in the grant making team, and I'm based in Assam in India.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wei Sun. I'm one of the program officers for grants management with the team, and I'm based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Over to you, Suchi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shuchi. I'm also a program officer with the grants team, and I'm based out of New Delhi, India.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nivedita. I'm also a program officer with the grants team, and I'm based out of Bangalore, India.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eileen. I am providing communication support, and I'm based out of Mauritius.
Hi, everyone. I am Viruna, finance manager, based from Sri Lanka.
Do we have anyone else from the team?
No, I think that's it. All right, thank you, everyone. Can we move on to the next slide, please? All right, so just some housekeeping notes before we proceed. As you already know, the presentation part of this session is being recorded. So the presentation minus the Q&A will be shared after the webinar on our YouTube channel, on our social media and other communications channels, so that those who are not able to join us today can benefit from the knowledge sharing. We've disabled video, voice, and public chat for all participants in the interest of safety and anonymity of those attending. If you have any queries, comments, or concerns, please directly add them to the Q&A chat. There is a dedicated Q&A segment right after the presentation, so you can also message your questions then. On that note, please hold your questions until after the presentation in case they are actually answered during the presentation itself. We do encourage everyone to refer to the SFM FAQ at the link that we shared in the general chat. So in a webinar, the default setting is for attendees to be muted. If you raise your hand, we see you and we do acknowledge you, but to have your questions answered, please type it into the Q&A box. There may be some questions that we are not able to answer right now, but we will make sure to respond to them via email once the webinar is over. So please add your emails, your questions, so we can make sure to be able to do so. Just to note that unfortunately, we are unable to respond directly to questions about registration and the required documents during this webinar, as the context is different for each applicant and country. So if you have questions about those, please message our colleague Eileen with your email address, and they will be responded to via email by our team members shortly after the webinar. You can also email us directly at an email address that we will drop into the general chat. All right, so moving on to the next slide. The agenda for today is fairly straightforward. I will invite Nivedita, my colleague, to briefly introduce the fund, and then my colleague Shuchi will take you through the specific grant for which you can apply and the kind of groups that we support through the grant, followed by a quick snapshot of the application process. My colleague Wei San will end with some tips on a strong application before we open for questions. All right, moving on. Over to you, Nivedita.
Thanks, Yasmin. I will just give you all a brief overview of WFA. We are a regional feminist fund, and we support the realization of women's, girls', trans, and intersex people's rights in Asia. We were established in 2004 as the South Asia Women's Fund to address lack of resources for grassroots women's groups in 5 countries in South Asia. In 2018, we transformed into Women's Fund Asia with a bigger mandate to fund rights-based work across 18 countries in Asia. Please also note that SOF India, which is a national women's fund and is a sister fund of WFA, is a different entity from WFA. Next slide, please. I will also quickly take you through what we do. There are 4 pillars to our work, and the first of that is grant making. We offer flexible and multi-level grants to address the needs and priorities of women, girls, trans, and intersex people-led movements. We also enable collective reflection and strategizing for our partners and other actors as a part of our linking and learning work. Next slide. We're also committed to strengthening the feminist aid architecture for feminist movements in India, in Asia, bolstering feminist movement partnerships and power, and also growing and tending to our own feminist capacities, communities, and innovations. This is the broad overview of what WFA is committed to, and I will now hand it over to Shuchi to take you more closely through the Strengthening Feminist Movements grant-making program. Over to you, Shuchi.
Thank you, Nivedita. So Strengthening Feminist Movements, or SFM, is one of our flagship as well as more flexible grant-making programs, which is resourced through a pool of funds from various donors. You can apply in English as well as 17 Asian languages. Application forms are available in 13 Asian languages apart from English. So this is a fund that supports individual activists, organizations, and networks working at local, subnational, and national. So regional and global organizations and women's funds are not eligible. Those can apply or would have applied under a Leading from the South call, which closed last week. Please note that those who currently hold an LFS grant, which goes beyond December 2022, since there are 2 or 3 year grants, cannot apply. However, those who have applied for LFS 2022, which is the current grant cycle, can also apply for SFM 2022. If you meet the eligibility criteria, that is. If selected for both, you will be eligible only to receive one of the grants. What is to be noted here is that SFM provides programmatic, which means programs or ongoing or new initiatives can be supported, as well as institutional support, which includes salaries, rent, audits, and other operational costs. It can also be used to fill funding gaps of ongoing or new programs and collaborations. Under this call, we're supporting individuals and organizations across these 17 countries in Asia. This list is also available in the call guidelines, which you can find on our website. So please do go through it to see if your country is on it. In addition to that, WFA does support work in Afghanistan as well, though currently we're looking at a focused crisis funding call for that next year. And hence it is not included in this list for now. So what are the objectives of strengthening feminist movements, or as we shorten it and call SFM? As clear from the name itself, SFM seeks to support feminist movements. And the common thread that we see across the SFM grants are these three, which are promoting feminist principles and a rights-based perspective in women, girls, trans, and intersex rights work in the region, the key components of which are decision-making, agency, and voice. Strengthening the leadership of women, girls, trans, and intersex people, especially second-line leadership. Networking and collaborations among groups and activists working at local, subnational, and national levels. So especially also grants that support alliance building or network building or cross-movement work. So for this grant cycle, we have 5 priority areas for funding. This is really not in terms of limiting who can apply, but in terms of giving you an idea of the range of work that we are able to support under SFM. So one of the thematic areas is autonomy, decisions, and sexual rights. Through this thematic portfolio, we've been able to support interventions that promote the right to sexuality, decision-making, and bodily autonomy of women, girls, trans, and intersex people. We have also supported work on addressing child and forced marriage. A lot of work happening with LGBTIQ groups, working on abortion rights, and sexual and reproductive health and rights work also falls under this. Under Access to Justice thematic, we have supported initiatives which focus on increasing women, girls, trans, and intersex people's access to justice, including raising legal awareness among communities. This also includes creating pathways and mechanisms for survivors to access lawyers and the judicial system. Training women paralegals and supporting women lawyers is another area of work we've supported. As part of the environmental justice priority area, which is actually one of our newest thematic areas, we have supported work which centers the voices and leadership of women, girls, trans, and intersex people in the decision-making processes and policy-making, especially focusing on access to and distribution of resources and disaster management, climate change adaptation, and sustainable development. Issues like safe working conditions, climate-related displacement, indigenous and Adivasi rights, mining, deforestation, and others also fall under this theme. Under the movement and labor priority area, we support interventions which focus on women, girls, trans, and intersex people's right to safe migration, economic justice, and labor rights. Also looking at work with those who are vulnerable in informal and stigmatized sectors such as sex work, garment factories, tea plantations, domestic work, and migrant labor. And finally, under Strengthening Feminist Voices, we provide grants to support and strengthen grassroots feminist leadership and movements. This includes, similar to other thematic areas, institutional and core support, especially for small grassroots groups. The kind of work that would fall under this that we would support would be strengthening feminist discourses, feminist research, mobilization work, use of innovative approaches like ICT, etc. These are just indicative examples on the kind of work we can support through this grant cycle. But as I said, this doesn't really limit on what you can apply on, provided that it meets what we seek to support through the grant making program. And especially we invite and encourage applicants to apply under environmental justice thematic as well as access to justice thematic, apart from the others that I've mentioned. So what are the kind of applications we prioritize? We prioritize groups that are naturally working on strengthening movements, since that's the mandate of this grant making program. We prioritize groups that are self-led, which means that the board and staff leadership, as well as composition, is primarily of women, girls, trans, and intersex people. We support groups that apply feminist principles and have a rights-based approach to furthering women, girls, trans, and intersex people's rights. And in case you're, you want to know a little bit more in terms of what we mean by feminist principles or rights-based programming, you would also find this information in the call package in the FAQ document of the call package. So who do we fund? What do we fund? As I said, we support individuals and organizations that are advancing women's, girls, trans, and intersex rights, that are committed to feminist principles and rights-based approaches, especially individuals and organizations that are directly linked to women, trans, intersex, and other rights-based movements, as mentioned before, are self-led and representative of the constituency that they're working with. So what do we not fund? We do not fund strategies that violate women, girls, trans, and intersex rights. Example, raid and rescue, anti-sex work, anti-abortion, anti-LGBTIQ rights, etc. Microcredit, microfinance, and other income generation activities, for-profit groups, educational institutions, individuals and organizations with political affiliations or who are part of party politics, service delivery, humanitarian assistance, religious institutions or faith-based groups, and also chapters of multilateral organizations or INGOs that are actually based in the global north. So there are three categories basically under strengthening feminist movements under which you can apply. The individual category is a one-year grant, which is only programmatic, and the maximum grant amount that you can apply for is $5,000 US. The second category is a one-year organization grant. If you're an organization, you can apply for this. Doesn't matter if you're a new applicant or you are a past WFA grantee. These are both programmatic and institutional. It can either be completely programmatic or institutional or a combination of both. This has an annual budget ceiling, which is $50,000 US, and the maximum grant amount is $10,000 US. The two-year organization grant comes with additional eligibility criteria and is only for our past WFA grantee partners. This also one can apply for programmatic as well as institutional or a combination. The nature of this can be both. The minimum annual budget this requires is $20,000 and maximum $75,000. And the maximum grant amount is $20,000. As I mentioned, this is only for our past WFA grantee partners. And as you can see here, with an additional criteria of them having held at least 2 grants from us since 2010 onwards. And what is also to be noted here is that during the selection process, we would also be looking at compliance in terms of reporting for the past grants. Please do note that in case if you apply and are eligible for the 2-year organizational grant, you can also select within the application whether you want to be considered for the 1-year grant in case it's not selected for the 2-year grant, in which case we would also include it in the pool of 1-year organizational grants. So the selection process, how long will this take is now a question that you might have. This will take about 6 months process, and this is largely due to the volume of applications we receive. And we do go through each application very closely. The review involves both WFA team as well as advisors and regional experts who also look at the kind of applications we received. So please note that the grant announcements will be made in January, which is 6 months from now, in January 2023. And this is really a breakdown that you can see on your screens in terms of the process. Next, we come how to apply, and I promise this is the last section I'm presenting, after which I'll hand it over to another colleague. On the WFA website, in case if you're going to the WFA website, or either through the announcements of posts you would have received, you can access our call packages or the online form. In case you're going through the WFA website, which is women'sfundasia.org, you can click on apply for a grant and then go to the SFM page, landing page. On this, you would be able to read about the grant making program, most of what I've shared, as well as find links to either apply online or via email, as you can see on the screen. Irrespective of whether you decide to apply online or you want to apply, using a downloadable form, which you can email to us, please download the call package in your language, in the chosen language, and then go through all the material before you apply, which would answer a lot of questions that you might have. When you click on the downloadable link on the website, it will open up the public drive, where, as I mentioned, you can look at the various languages, select the folder that you want, and download. Please do not request edit access because these folders are actually to be downloaded, so you can open them, look at them closely, and then decide, in case if you're only applying in English, then you can apply using the online form. Or if you're looking at the accessible English form, you can access it on the drive or apply in any of the other 13 languages. Within these folders, you would find the various formats and templates that you would use. Please do make sure that you're using the correct proposal form, whether if you're applying for an individual grant, that it is the individual application form, and if you're applying for an organizational one, it's the same one for both 1-year and 2-year grants, with some additional questions for those who are applying for 2-year grants. Similarly, for the budget, there are actually 3 formats: individual and a 1-year organizational grant and 2-year organizational grant. So please do ensure that you're filling the right format. And this is actually quite self-explanatory. Once you open up the drive, you'd be able to see all of this, even as it may seem at the moment that we're going quickly through this. You would find everything you need within the folder. Please do look closely at the sections within the application form, as these would also require you to furnish references, agree to consent, and will also include a checklist of all the documents that you would require, that are additional documents that you're expected to submit. Thank you so much for patiently listening to me. And with this, I'll now hand it over to my colleague, Wei-san, to share a little bit more on the online form, and also some tips on how to increase your chances for the grant. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So this section, what we would like to do is to provide some tips that we hope will push your application ahead, because we do receive a very high volume of applications. So we hope that these tips will help you, in your applications. Right. Next slide, please. So before we start with the top tips, I just wanted to highlight again the deadline of 29th of July, because we really strongly recommend that you plan to submit your application 2 or 3 days in advance. Especially if you are applying online, we really don't want you to miss the application deadline just because of technical issues, with internet connectivity and all those issues. So if you are applying online, and you can see a picture of the form on the right, and my colleague Yasmin has been sharing the links on chat. If you are applying online, one really important feature we want to highlight to you is the save and resume function. Please save periodically so that the latest version of your application is saved. When you click on this save and resume, it will ask you for your email, it'll ask you to set a new password for the form, and then after that, you can access your form from the link that is sent to your email, and you can complete the sections as you go along. So this save and resume button will be either on the top right of the form or the bottom right end of the form. It is visible on both ends. Next slide, please. Right, so where do I start? So before you start and put all that effort into submitting an application, we ask that you please find out first if you are eligible. So you can look at the guidelines that my colleague Suchi highlighted earlier, and the guidelines will tell you what is the minimum and maximum size of your annual budget that is allowed, in terms of your board and staff composition, what are the minimum percentages, that we require. All of these are in the guidelines. The next thing to find out is which grant category you want to apply for. Are you applying as an individual? Are you applying as an organization? And if you are an organization, are you applying for 1 year or are you applying for 2 years? So again, the guidelines will tell you for each of these categories, what are the eligibility requirements. So things like your grant size, the duration, what we will and will not fund, all of this information is in the guidelines. One thing I will highlight though, again, is that for 2-year organizational proposals, this is limited to groups that have received at least 2 WFA grants from 2010 onwards. There are also minimum and maximum budget requirements that you need to check, in the guidelines. The FAQs, we also have a frequently asked question document, and the FAQs will answer a lot of your burning questions, such as how many applications can I submit? So for example, if you submit multiple applications, even if these applications are very strong, unfortunately, you will only receive 1 grant if you are successful. The only exceptions, some of the exceptions, are if you apply for 1 grant, perhaps as an organization, and then a separate grant as a consortium with other organizational partners or other partners. Again, all these questions that you might have, they are also covered in the FAQ. And finally, the checklist of required documents, that's also really important. And we ask that you look at it when, before you start the application, because it tells you what are all the other documents that you must submit in addition to the application form. So, and if you do not have some of these documents, that is fine, but you just need to let us know why, so that we can understand the context better, or we can understand why some documents are not available, and that will help us in our assessment. Next slide, please. Right, so tell us who you are. And this question is about the identities that you hold as an individual or as an organizational applicant. So, who are you working with? Which communities is your organization representing? Are these communities in your leadership? What is your connection and your embeddedness within these communities? And I'm highlighting this because an important question for WFA, when we and our external committee of experts review applications, is they look to see if the work is self-led. So when I say self-led, what I mean is that WFA prioritizes self-led groups, meaning that the highest decision-making bodies is representative of the constituency with which you are working. So for example, an organization working on trans rights is led by the trans community, or perhaps an organization that is working on labor rights issues of garment workers are led by garment workers themselves. So that's some of the examples. So tell us in your application, if your organization and the work is led by your target community, and if not fully self-led, that is fine as well, but let us know how that community is involved in decision making, either in the programming or the organization as a whole. Right, the last slide of our tips. We do believe that everyone's work is really important, and so when the applications are reviewed, it's really tell us how critical your work is. How does it stand out from the crowd? And if you are actually, it doesn't have to be a brand new activity. If you have previous activities or this is a continuing program, then tell us about how it sustains your existing work. Tell us about what is the results, or what is the change that you want to achieve, and how will the activities that you have identified in your proposal, how will that lead to the change? Please also ensure that the proposed plan is realistic. We know that you understand your context, you understand the issues and how best to solve them. So you don't need to put more activities. You don't need to cram it with activities just to make the application seem worth funding. That is not what we're looking at all. If you are working in a difficult context or you have limited access to resources, this is really important. Tell us, and this will be taken into account during the review process. And finally, your application may be read by someone from a different part of Asia who does not or may not fully understand your working context. So please help the reviewer see all the connections by telling them about the context of your work. And that's it. That's our top tips, as it were. I hope it has been helpful. Please let us know what you found useful and what you would like to know more of. And we can continue to refine this information that we share with you. And please raise your questions in the Q&A. I will hand over to Eileen for the segment on Q&A.